Us growing up, the assumption was if you want to have a good investment, you have to own a home. But the thing is, it has so become out of reach that that paradigm isn't working for my generation, is not working for your daughter's generation.
So this is happening right before our eyes. And America doesn't know that. They don't know that this laundering system is happening.
All Rise. Welcome again, everyone. Thanks for joining us to another edition of All Rise. Hey, today we have two very esteemed guests, and we're so thankful that they could join us. We got David Kim. He is a candidate for the 34th Congressional District, and we got John Yi, who's a candidate for the 54th Assembly District. And we're so glad to have you guys. Thank you for taking the time to come out, speak with us in the community. Well, first of all, let's get a little introduction because I don't think that I could do you guys justice. Do you want to start first?
Yeah, I'll start at the lower levels. We're good with that. Hi everyone, my name is John Yi. I'm the candidate for the California State Assembly District 54. I was born and raised in Koreatown. It's where my parents immigrated in the 1970s as young immigrants. It's where my parents went to church. So this community is very much our community, my community. And so for the district I'm running for, it includes all of Koreatown. And real briefly, the reason I'm running is mostly for my grandfather. I literally saw what was going on I lived with him for like the last 5 years of his life. And all the issues you're seeing today manifested in his life. I just didn't put my words to it. So the lack of affordable housing for seniors, especially in Koreatown. He ping-ponged from one uncle's home to another. The lack of dignified public spaces. I promise you, you go to any McDonald's in K-Town, 8, 9 in the morning, it's full of Korean and Latino seniors because we don't have dignified public spaces. Third issue, on one of the days when he was meeting with his friends, one of his friends got hit by a car and killed, walking to that McDonald's. Our streets are incredibly dangerous. The leading cause of death of our elementary middle school kids in K-Town are car crashes. The majority of the seniors that are killed are seniors of color, immigrant seniors. And so across the board, systems had failed my grandfather. And so if I'm not running to represent him, who is? And the story of my grandfather is not just his story, but it's reflected in other parts of the district, whether you're a Latino senior or a Chinese American senior in Chinatown. And so for me, I want to run for that.
I see. Well, it's a good cause, running for
Thank
your
you.
grandfather.
I appreciate it.
Federal.
Yes, federal. Hi, everyone. My name is David Kim. I'm running for U.S. Congress in CA 34. And I ran for this seat before. Last November 2022, we ran a very good race, despite being outraised 7-1. We ended up with 49% of the general election votes in the November 2022 general election, and over 121,000 votes. We just lost by 3,000 votes. We're running again because things have not changed at all. Our district continues to be the fourth poorest congressional district in California out of the 52. It's the 20th poorest out of the 435. And currently my job is being a public attorney for Parents and Children's Court. So I represent the most vulnerable parents and families of Los Angeles County, and their children are being taken away mostly because of poverty. Because poverty is intersectional and it's the base root and cause of many issues affecting our families and citizens and constituents today. And so with that being said, in addition to federal legislation that I want to change in regards to foster families and everything else, I think right now what's crucial is for the past 50 years, we've seen a transfer of $50 trillion from the bottom 90% to the top 10%. We've seen politicians in DC pledge their allegiance to constituents like us 50 years ago, but now their allegiance is to special interests and corporate interests. And so that's why the norm now is for anybody to make 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet, because over those past 50 years, corporations, their utmost loyalty used to be to their workers, to their employees, to the welfare of their workers' families. But as during the past 50 years, they started to enter into these partnerships with politicians, they tried to cut costs at all corners, even at the cost of the livelihood of their workers. And so that's why there's such a huge income, wage, and wealth gap in America compared to other industrialized developed countries. And so while John works to fix our infrastructure and our local systems and programs on a federal level, the government needs to be helped leading in terms of the different programs, abilities to live, ability to make a living, to have healthcare, to even have the basic rights to pursue life is not there. And so that's what I'm running for. And then I know John's running for that on a community infrastructure level.
I brought my daughter here today. She's watching this recording. She's Ellie. But I had this discussion with her all the time. She's 17. And then we are having this discussion because she does speech and debate, and then she does extemp. So she is aware of a lot of social issues, and we have lengthy discussions about, especially about youth and affordability. And that becomes a topic, and I told her, you guys need to really start a grassroots movement talking about how these policy decisions affect their generation. Anyone between 18 and 30 are not going to be able to buy a house with regular salary is given. And then I want to ask you specifically, like, how would you propose changing, that kind of a state of, current affairs, and what kind of proposals do you guys have?
Well, let's talk about it issue by issue, right? Sure. So just so you guys mentally prepare, right? Let's talk about 4, I think, of the biggest issues facing both of your districts, because there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Yours is bigger, but there's overlap. So affordability, right? Housing, homelessness, right? Or the unhoused, and then immigration. I mean, first, I just want to clarify. You said 34th congressional district was the poorest district in the state.
Fourth poorest in the state.
By median income?
Out of 52 districts, yes, by median income, yes.
Is that, like, how do you separate, like, let's just talk about the Korean community, right? Like, that's not really the same when we separate it out by cultural background, right? Like,
right,
the Korean community here isn't that poor.
Well, I mean, and I would say that the more wealthier Koreans do not tend to live in our district. They tend to move out once they reach a certain level of income threshold or savings, and so they tend to move out.
Except in Solaire.
But except in Solaire,
Is it fully occupied now?
Solaire is not all Koreans either, anyways. So.
Yeah. But I mean, but yeah. Well, with that being said, I mean, going to the issues, it's given the lack of data that we have right now, it's difficult for us to know what the median income is for segmented populations of the district. Okay. So that's stuff that we must do better on. But in terms of taking a step back, in terms of the top issues that you're talking about, I think it's all related even to the affordability issue.
Yeah, I think affordability, you also have to mention healthcare and education within that, because, young generation, I think that basically school loans and unable to afford, decent healthcare also becomes a problem. As well as housing. Yeah. So we probably should talk about that too.
So we can do our own different takes. I mean, you guys sort of like tell us everything.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me ask you this. I'll start with this question, right? I'll start with John, right? Just because I wanted to state to federal. Yeah. So, talk to me. What's wrong with affordability here in Los Angeles?
So let's break it down. What are the 2 things that people pay the most on for their daily life? It is rent and transportation. Rent is your bills, transportation, your gas, car, maintenance, XYZ, purchasing a car. And so if those 2 are the biggest money suckers, how do we reduce those things, right? And so in our district, we're about 80% renters, overwhelmingly renters. Our district also happens to be an eviction hotspot. Cash for key schemes, hotspot. Koreatown specifically. If you actually look at the map of all the zip codes, 4 of the top 20 is Koreatown. That is what's happening to our district. And so to your point earlier about Koreans being on the wealthier end, I'm sure there are wealthy Koreans, but they often move out of K-Town. I've been canvassing in Koreatown for the past few months. The number of low-income Koreans that you run into, it's a hidden sort of poverty. And I think there's almost a stigma of it in our own community. So how do we reduce the cost of rent, and how do we make transit cheaper? So for me, it goes back to preventing renters from falling into homelessness. So even like rent subsidies, utility support. A lot of our seniors, especially in Koreatown, they live in buildings without air conditioning. So you have to purchase that, you have to buy, you have to pay the utility bill. So are there ways we can provide that kind of support? Loan forgivenesses for specifically, especially when it comes to our essential workers, the people we heralded during the pandemic that are particularly vulnerable. Public transit, making that free is something that we've talked about. The fares that you pay for public transit makes up only less than 2% of the actual budget of the entire LA Metro. So it is doable. So making transit free. And so these are other ways we can reduce the cost of living for individuals. And I think for students specifically, like I had about $90,000 in school loans. And I luckily had the public service loan forgiveness program. And so it got wiped away because I worked in a nonprofit for about 10 plus years. So are there ways we can provide students who are recently leaving college to reduce their loan debt? Again, with targeted loan forgivenesses. Another thing is, us growing up, the assumption was if you want to have a good investment, you have to own a home, right? That was what we were fed, which is a home is how you build generational wealth, and which is still true today. But the thing is, it has so become out of reach that that paradigm isn't working for my generation, is not working for your daughter's generation. And so what does investment in future savings look like that is not a physical home property when it's so difficult to get that right now? And I think these are the serious questions that we need to really think about of what does savings look like in the future. And so yeah, I mean, I think these are some of the solutions that we're looking at. How do we reduce the cost of living so people don't end up in homelessness and in poverty?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add one more cost in there, and that's if you're in the city of LA, the utility rates, right? LADWP. Hello, anyone out there? Please stop forcing your crazy bills down our throats, right? Like, that's crazy. Because, I mean, I'm sure you guys are aware, the utility rates for Ventura County and for all the bordering counties to LA, way lower than we do. So you're telling me it's more expensive to run utilities here than it is to the counties that are right next door to us?
I think that's
right.
supply and demand problem. Because
It's supply and demand, but also a lot of these utility companies, the way it's the state utility companies, the big fires that some of them started, who is accountable for covering those costs? It always ends up on the state.
Exactly.
And so we cover that bill. Or we have, well, we do it by the utility, they're public utilities, so they cover it, but then they jack up the rates for their malfeasance. So the question then is, how do we hold these agencies accountable? And again, it is the state's job to do that. Because the state's job are the managers of these agencies, their budgets, appointing people. So I think we definitely need far more accountability. This goes back to what we were saying earlier, is when everyone is a Democrat, what does it actually mean? Especially when it comes to spending all this money and holding ourselves accountable. If you are the party that everyone's part of, it's hard to point the finger at yourself. So I think candidates like ours are trying to build a party that is more reflective of our needs with an urgency that I think needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, then you were talking a little bit about, how do we maybe reduce some of the burden on transportation costs by having, cheaper metro fares.
Yeah, public transit, yeah.
I don't even know what the metro fares are right now. I don't know how burdensome they are.
Yeah.
But I think, one of the problems I think we could all agree is that, there's a safety issue,
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's-
Because you can make
right.
Metro free, but I wouldn't let any of my family ride the Metro anyways, right? Even if it was free. That's another built-in cost of
Exactly.
Metro, right? Like if you get more people on it, you're going to have to provide more security for it, which is a labor cost that might be even more expensive than like providing the fares.
But like, if we've all been to Seoul subway station, they have ads downstairs, so you can sell ad space. You can put vendors in the subway station and generate revenue. There's so much creativity that we can explore in generating revenue and a robust public transit system, which our city needs so much. But yet, these ideas are never pursued.
Yeah. What do you think, David? What's the problem with affordability in Los Angeles?
I think John accurately described kind of what's been going on in the local structural landscape of things. On the federal level, like what I had touched upon before, we have a complete abandonment of the people on a national scale. And so just to kind of give you an example, 50 years ago, we had what was called a three-legged stool of savings. So one stool would be your savings that you get to save from the money you make in your job. The other leg to that stool is investments. And then the other leg to that stool is pensions. But then back in the 70s, you have the death of the pension, where corporations went to politicians in Washington and said, hey, why is this on us? Like, let's put the burden on employees and on workers themselves. So starting in the end of the 70s, you see the death of the pension. So now most people don't even know what a pension is. They're replaced with 401ks, which are nowhere near pensions, for those who even know what pensions are. But even those who work for the government no longer are getting pensions anymore too. So now there's a two-legged stool, but then most people don't even, 1 in 4 Americans are living in utter poverty. About 60 to 70% of Americans don't have savings beyond 1 or 2 months. So with that being said, there's no savings leg part of that stool. And then there's no investments because most Americans can't participate in investments. So this three-legged stool just became a stool without any legs. So that's the condition of all Americans across the country right now. So it's very depressing for people in their teens, in their 20s, kind of seeing all of this to realize back in the days when we were little growing up, our parents would talk about, oh, let's see what house we can get or buy. And that was their dream and they did it. But for our generation, we don't hear people our age talking about buying a house because that's completely impossible. And so over the years, you've had exponentially impacted conditions of just complete abandonment of the people. So our campaign platform is centered around 3 core values. People-centered politics, we need to bring that back. So what does that mean? So it means fighting against corporate PAC interest funding of politics right now. So what's currently happening right now in America is every 2 years, Congress, so some of the members of Congress change. And then every 2 to 4, 6 years, some of the members of Senate change. But as these campaigns happen, billions and billions of dollars are being poured into these politicians' campaigns by these big industries, whether it be Meta, whether it be Uber, or what have you, Raytheon, Northrop. And after they get reelected, then when it comes to budgeting time, they package all of these little bills into these omnibus big packages that are impossible to read, that cover 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pages. Who's going to read that? But in those are buried these corporate welfare handouts back to these same people who donated to these politicians, because their incentive is to get all that money back when it comes to congressional budgeting cycle. So this is happening right before our eyes. And America doesn't know that. They don't know that this laundering system is happening. And this is corrupt. That's why people are suffering right now. Because all of the money that should be coming back to us, to our pockets, are not coming back to us. That's why in a pandemic, you see record profits for CEOs, for executives of companies, when people are struggling and barely making ends meet. And so that's the first part of our people-centered politics, where we really need to cut out the corporate funding of politics. A lot of people don't understand, but what does that mean, David? Yeah, they might get a better chance, but if they get a better chance, isn't it because they have more experience there? No. They're there because they don't want to break that tradition of somebody coming in to say, hey, let's get rid of all of the corporate money, because if we do that, then these corporations can't get money from the congressional budgeting sessions. So that's why they're afraid of people like myself, of people like Ocasio-Cortez, of running, because once we get in there, we're going to start shouting and screaming against the tradition of politics that is happening. That's why when we ran last cycle, Judy Chu spoke out against me. Jamie Raskin, Congressmember Jamie Raskin spoke out against me. And all of these incumbents, they're protecting each other because they don't want newcomers coming in.
What were they saying when you're saying they're speaking out against you about your campaign finance reform platform?
Well, just about us as a candidate, as a campaign. So Congressmember Jamie Raskin, he sent out a text blast and an email blast to all constituents in our district saying that if I were elected, I would be a threat to our American democracy without providing any detailed reasons. And then with Judy Chu, it's a little tangent, but since you asked, I'm going to answer it. With Judy Chu, Congressmember Gomez sent out his volunteers to go knock on doors last cycle, and they were going around to Latino voters saying, hey, David Kim's not Latino, and our district must always have a Latino congressmember, and since you're Latino, you need to vote Latino. And they knocked on City Council member Eunices Hernandez's door, who's my good friend and who endorsed us. So she called me on the spot and said, hey, Gomez's volunteers telling me to vote for him because he's Latino and you're not. And so that got into the LAist News article, and somehow Gomez got Judy Chu's quote in there, and Judy Chu says David is creating these lies 6 days before the general election. So with that being said, it's like these incumbents are going to whatever degree they can to protect any newcomers from coming into Congress, because once we shake up that model, everything 무너져요, everything crumbles. And so in our people-centered politics, it's getting rid of corporate PAC money. It's introducing ranked choice voting. So this idea of ranked choice voting is where, let's say we have in Isabel Jurado's race, which is Kevin De Leon's race for city council right now, they had about, I think, over 7-8 candidates. If we had a ranked choice voting system right now, Kevin De Leon would have already been knocked out.
Can you explain? I think a lot of people don't understand the
So for example, ranked choice voting is, let's say there's 8 candidates running for office. 8th candidate that receives the lowest number of votes marked off. Those votes are redistributed to whoever the second choice candidate was. Seventh place candidate gets disqualified. Their votes are then redistributed to whoever was the second place candidate after that one, or third place, and so forth, so that it's eliminating each candidate and redistributing their votes until you have a winning candidate. And so if we had a ranked choice voting system, Kevin De Leon would not be in the general election this cycle. He would have lost in the primary, and we would have had Isabel and some other new challenger in that. A third part of our people-centered politics is introducing democracy vouchers. So it's introducing this idea of public financing of elections, because right now it's whoever receives the most money from corporations win is the winning model. We need to get rid of that model. It's a waste of our money. Imagine all of that money being poured into our economy, into our communities, and how that could help us, the billions of dollars poured into campaigning time. But instead, if we were to give every American, let's say 100 US democracy dollars, I give you 100 US democracy dollars, Alex, you get to choose 50 of that to donate to me. You get to choose 20 of that to donate to John, and then 30 you might donate to some other candidates in your neighborhood. For a candidate to participate in that system, you need to give up your corporate PAC money and say, I give up my corporate PAC money in order to participate in this public democracy voucher system. Because studies have shown that when people like ourselves are given that incentive to invest and to put into somebody's campaign, we get more civically engaged as an electorate as well. And so we'll see increase in voter turnout as well. So that's our people-centered politics platform. So I know when you had asked your question of affordability, you're probably looking for A, B, C, D, E policies, which are also policies that we must work on, whether it be with what are some measures we can do to curb inflation, what are some measures we can do to end real estate speculation and commodification of the real estate market. And those are things that are definitely in our campaign. But to take a step back, we can't just do that alone, because if we do that alone as single bill piece items, they will never pass. Because structurally, what is there in Washington, what is there in Congress is foundationally rotten. And so if you look at our website, people-centered politics must be the foundation. Then you have co-governance, where Congress members are co-governing with us, legislating with us, meeting with us. And so prior to my running for Congress, for example, this Congress member never had office hours, never had public office town halls. When you called in, you could never talk to the Congress member. Now he's having semi-annual phone town halls, but that's it. But imagine a world where we tell our Congress members what bills we want, what issues we have, and what solutions we want, and then they come back and report to us. Imagine what would it be like if we had monthly town halls in every neighborhood. Imagine what a constituent caucus would be, where you get to sign up to be part of the Koreatown constituent caucus for the congressional district. Imagine what a constituent lobbying day would be. And so once we change the people-centered politics, the co-governance foundation, then we can have more of these life-empowering policies like healthcare for all, housing for all of that, affordability. But the reason why these have not happened, and they only remain as magical words for the past 10, 15 years, we've heard Green New Deal, Medicare for all for the past 15 years, 10, 15 years. It has never changed because the foundation's rotten. And so our campaign is about changing the structural portions of Congress and really bring a moral revolution to it, in addition to also fighting for real policies that can help. And so that's a long answer to your affordability question. But
have you ever had a debate with Gomez?
I have not, but I've seen it.
He's scared. Whenever I just heard this 10-minute.
Because I've seen a video clip of him debating Robert On from 2017. It's pretty bad. He's really bad at debating, and so
I think
he's really bad at debating. And so
there is a point to that. What you two spoke earlier, and because we're kind of aware of these things and we are always interested, Alex and I, we almost understand what you guys are talking about. But I could tell you, most people would not, right? The viewers watching this right now, what you just have told us 10 minutes, they probably retain 10% of it, And I think that's the problem. Like, how do you connect to the voter? By sounding just smart and informed, right? It's not enough sometimes. Even for the younger constituents, like my daughter, age of 18 to 30, if you're talking about how corrupt societies and all these different systems, how it goes, like they're really not interested or aware of that. So how do we get their political activism engaged? Like you said, how do we raise their awareness, willing to participate in the system, other than talking about what's wrong with the system, but what are you proposing to get their attention, get their vote? Because I could ask her right now and how much she understood what you just said. Probably, even though she's one of the more aware ones at her age, she will tell me she probably didn't retain much of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's because we're talking about such a big general
Of course, it's a
idea,
broad-
right?
yeah.
We'd have to talk about something really specific, right? Like, just bring it back to John for a second when you talked about housing, right? And you said, in the past, he's looking at me like, oh my God, are you going to call me out on something I said? No, it's nothing bad. It's nothing bad. No, you said that housing used to be like, right, the investment vehicle, right? For our, fathers, mothers generation, right? Let's call them the boomers, right?
Yes.
So the boomer generation, their investment vehicle was housing, right? And it worked out really well from them, right? Because like when my parents came and we lived in the San Fernando Valley, homes there, they were under $200,000, right? You could get a really nice home, especially if you were in the West Valley, like really far out, like West Hills, Chatsworth. You could get almost a brand new home for sub 200,000, right? And then now, right, those homes are over $1 million easy, right? Maybe over 2 million. So in some ways, though, can't we say that the unaffordability now just showed that it really was a good investment vehicle, right?
That is the issue. So it's wild that my dad immigrated here not knowing a word of English, having no education, and he has more, at my age, he has more wealth than I do. And I went to college, grad school, speak perfect English, right? And so that is the state of affairs. You're hitting on something which is, look, we say housing is a right, but if we buy and sell it in the marketplace, it is not a right, it is a commodity.
Yeah.
So that's the contradiction right now in this space. You have elected officials who are saying that. And so yes, you're right, it is a good investment because you're getting more money out of it, but at what cost to society? Who is being left out? So I think that is one of the issues. I want to go your earlier question about your daughter. What I would say to her. Oh, she's right there. Two things I think are most. First, that we can already listen to them right now. The environment is a huge issue for the youth. It is an existential question that they're going to face that most of us, sure, it'll get worse as we get older, but it is their generation's burden. And so talking about the environment is one. And this is another issue I have not heard enough people talk about, which is AI. I am actually terrified about what AI is going to do to your daughter's generation's jobs. Everything they are studying right now in school, will it actually lead to a job that they can benefit, grow, and be able to build a life with? And for many folks, even in my friends who are accountants, lawyers, their industries are being upended by AI. And we are just giving that there's Congress, there's been no action on it. They've given sort of free reign. And so I think speaking on these issues that have not been given enough visibility, I think is going to be important. So the future AI and jobs and the environment. And so I think those are two things we can definitely lean on when it comes to the youth.
Is housing a right in LA?
No.
If you can't afford to live in Beverly Hills, 90210 is a no-go for you if you don't have the job or the finances to make that work. So that means you're gonna have to go out to surrounding communities, surrounding counties, surrounding states, and that's how we actually prevent overcrowding.
Your counterpoint is based off of a premise. And that premise is that it is okay to have segregated communities based on wealth.